Welcome to the first episode of Outer Heaven, the Knives Monroe podcast. I'm your host, Knives Monroe. Now, let me get a couple of things off my chest real quick. This is my first podcast. This is the first episode. I've been on a few podcasts. I was with Wes Anthony and Rudy Obias on the Auteur cast. We talked about raising Arizona. That was incredible. I've loved podcasts for a very long time. I'm going to pop my neck. I don't know if you can hear that. And I got obsessed with podcasts right when it was kind of coming out. I started listening to them in 2009. I think I was, obviously a rabid fan of the ABC's TV show Lost. And the first podcast I ever heard was like a episode weekly recap podcast. Lost is actually what got me into Twitter too, now that I think about it. And I was kind of hooked. I love being able to multitask, go out for a walk and listen to a podcast. I like to be able to, if I have to wait in line at the bank, I put a podcast on. I'm fine. I got company. I can laugh. People look at me like I'm a weirdo, but that's not really unusual. So being able to do this for the first time is really cool. Steve Jobs said, good artists copy, great artists steal. And he was stealing Picasso when he said that, because Picasso said that. This podcast is going to take the form of some of my favorites, and I just want to give them shout-outs right now, because without them, I don't know if I would have got the balls to do this. I love Battleship Pretension with Tyler Smith and David Bax. I love Guys We Fucked, the anti-slut-shaming podcast with Christina Hutchinson and Corinne Fisher. Of course, What the Fuck? WTF with Mark Maron, just to name a few. I listen to those podcasts religiously, so I might take the form of what the fuck. I just can't help that. As an artist, as a filmmaker, as a videographer, whatever you want to call me, I think I have a responsibility to everything that I've ever learned, and I'm still learning. I just love people so much. I want to interview them. So I think, this podcast will definitely take that form. Now, this is the very first episode 0, if you will. And I'm really just going to, talk about myself, get into myself in the episode proper. Right now, this is really just a pre-frame for you guys. Thank you for listening. I'm going to be filming these as well, so check out Instagram at The Outer Heaven. That's Heaven, Haeven. That's right. Now, I'm going to be paying a lot of homages in this episode, just out of respect, because I appreciate the podcast form so much. It's all about repetition, just like working out. The more I do this, the longer I do it, the better I'm going to get at it, the more value I'll be able to give every one of my listeners, and that's very important to me. So, thank you if you're listening and if you're bearing with me. I really appreciate it. I'm not really the self-deprecating type, so, forgive me if right now I'm kind of navel-gazing when I'm talking right now. Truth be told, I think I was blessed with the silver tongue, so being able to communicate is kind of my biggest passion. That's what I do as a filmmaker. I try to convey these abstract ideas in a visual form, and that's what I do as a screenwriter as well, and that's what I do with all videography, try to express something that is meaningful to me, and the podcast is just another pillar to be able to give you guys that and to connect with you guys and to leave something that is bigger than me behind. So thank you guys for being patient. Now, I'm going to ramble on for a little bit. Where I'm recording right now is a top secret location. I might have to edit around that. But this, as a parent, as a father of 2 kids, and as a businessman, that's basically like my third illegitimate child right there, my business, Outer Heaven. Very busy. So to be able to be secluded and talk to you guys is actually very therapeutic for me, not unlike my favorite podcasts as well. There's definitely a therapeutic quality to what we do, and I get to say we because, I'm looking at that 100th episode already. I'm looking at those live episodes at Yerberia Cultura where, we have an audience and things like that. That is just fascinating to me, and that is fun and meaningful, and definitely have a lot of stuff to say. So without further ado, This is Outer Heaven, the Knives Monroe podcast. I'm going to interview local artists here in the Rio Grande Valley, here in the RGV. That's musicians. I want to interview cops. I want to interview filmmakers. I want to interview photographers, comedians, graffiti artists, people that are, just that astound me, that interest me. And I kind of want to get their origin story here on the podcast to share with you guys because, we're all on the same journey right now. We're on the same trajectory. This is all of our origin story out there. And, I think we have a responsibility to, I always look back at the 16-year-old Knives. There's stuff that, I wish he lived in the digital age, the information age that we live in right now. I wish he knew that it was possible for him to be an entrepreneur. I wish he knew that it was possible for him to, be the change that he wanted to see in the world, to just speak from his heart and everything. So I'm always thinking about that 16-year-old Knives. He's always on the top of my mind. And so, us artists, we have a responsibility to shape the psychology of the guys that are up and coming, and also there's so much to learn from those that have kind of already done this, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I want to, interview people that really fascinate me, that I think will fascinate you. I said at the top of the show that this is kind of going to be an amalgamation of all the podcasts that I've been listening to for the past 7 years. In 2012, I was homeless for 6 weeks in Austin, and my friend Mark Hernandez, who I will definitely interview on the show, he's a filmmaker, great guy. I actually saw him here earlier, and he's like, "Who are you interviewing right now?" And I'm like, "Myself." This is the first episode, and this guy gave me basically all the episodes at the time of What the Fuck, Mark Maron's podcast, the show, and I had heard of it. I'd seen Mark promote it, but I put them all on my phone, MP3 format, and they really saved my life. That Robin Williams one stuck with me forever. That Louis C.K. one stuck with me forever. Judd Apatow and so on. I mean, there's just so many that were incredible. And, I kind of always knew when I got my shit together, I was going to make one too. So, I keep going back to that because, this, I can't really help it. It's part of my makeup to kind of always constantly be breaking like the fourth wall with my own psychology and my own process here. So here I am recording. The first interview, I really am going to get into my origin story in a bit, and I'm going to try to just give you the greatest hits version because I, contrary to popular belief, with my girlfriend anyways, I don't like to talk about myself. I feel like I have a lot to offer, and there's like some secrets that I really want to give away that I feel like have a lot of value, and I want you guys to be able to connect and say, you know what, if he has the balls to be able to be that kind of conscientious and self-aware of himself, if he has that sort of emotional intelligence, then you know what, then I think he definitely has something to offer. So here I am, and I do want to say, out of all the podcasts that I've listened to, one thing that I want to implement on the show, it's kind of an AMA, ask me anything sort of thing. Email me at TheOuterHaven, that's HAEVEN, TheOuterHaven at gmail.com. Interview me, ask me any questions that you'd like, and I'll go ahead and read some emails in the beginning of the show before we interview the guests. I'm just giving you guys some things that I want you to look forward to in the future. So, without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Indeed. It's like I'm talking to myself here. I'll just get into it. I have a little girl. She's 2 years old, and she's already obsessed with The Simpsons. And she's so bright, Anytime I talk to a parent and, they have kids, I instantly want to brag about my daughter and say, oh my gosh, she's so smart. She can count to 10. You know what I mean? She can sing songs. She knows over 50 words. It's not even impressive anymore at this point. It's kind of boring. I used to be like, oh my God, she said all these things. And now I'm just like, whatever, shut up. And, I talk about this with other dads, and they're just like, yeah, my son doesn't really talk. My son doesn't really walk either. And my son, he's kind of, not really, he's a late bloomer, let's just say. And then I feel bad, and I can't brag about my daughter. I know it's very selfish of me, but I definitely have a lot of empathy there. And when I see my 2-year-old daughter, especially, even in my 10-year-old boy, I see a lot of me in there. And, in these formative years, I know everything that I do, even though I'm silly half the time, everything I am, everything around them, I'm creating, the anxiety in my daughter already. And I'm thinking about that. And I remember being a very, very anxious kid, even at 2, 3, 4 years old, having these anxieties and so on. And the first conscious memory that I can really think of, I can't think of anything before that, is being 2 or 3 years old or something and watching Raising Arizona on television, on my TV set anyways. And I think my mom owned it. And just, I recall seeing John Goodman pull William Forsythe out of the ground after they escaped from prison, and just the rain. And so my first memory was a cinematic memory. And that's a very peculiar one, but I remember it. And it's interesting because I ended up becoming a filmmaker. Flash forward a few years later, my father, was cheating on my mom, sleeping with another woman, and I was 4 years old. And I told my mom, I said, hey, dad was with another woman. And that was what sparked the divorce, And being a 4-year-old, kind of being the guy that pulled that trigger, I don't blame myself for anything, but that was a cross to bear for a 4 and 5-year-old. And my mom did an incredible thing, and that was moved to Dallas. We were living in Oklahoma at the time, and she moved in with her older sister, and stayed there for a while she gave birth to my younger brother Jeremy when I was 5 years old. And as a parent now, I know my mom was 27 at that time, and I'm 28. So to kind of be there in that psychological capacity and kind of to have that experience, here I am 28. When she was 27, she was already divorced. She had 2 kids. She dropped out of college. She had to go back. She filed for bankruptcy. I mean, it was pretty rough. I look at her origin story, and I respect the hell out of it. So being 5 years old, I already was chocked full of phobias, and I was already chocked full of anxieties and fears, and I was very self-aware as a child. If I met somebody that just gave me I had just had weird vibes with, I just kind of knew that I was just always in my head as a child. I kind of knew. I would ask my family, my aunts and so on, that would just give me dirty looks. I would say, why do you hate me or something? Like, what don't you like about me? A 4-year-old doing that. When you're being real, something's wrong. If one of my children was that self-aware and they're asking people like, why don't you love me, sort of thing, I'd be like, this kid needs a hug, ASAP. So that was kind of like my makeup, at a very, very early age, and very impressionable. So without a dad, I didn't have my dad for, about 23 years. I'm an adult now. I never really had a dad, never really had a male role model kind of tell me, go out there and mow the lawn and do this and be a man and go do hard work and, eat piles of shit, plate and plate and plate after plate of shit, and smile and enjoy it because that's life. Life is hard work. I didn't really have that kind of upbringing of a dad tell me that, At an early age, finally moved to Donna, Texas, and it's where I'm at right now still. And, my mom worked at a video store while she was going to college, while she was interning at another place, while she had 2 kids. We lived with my grandma for a while. And, I'm my mom's age at that time when she was doing that. And I have 2 kids of my own now. And it's just stunning when I look back at that. And I got nothing but respect for her. And, without having that father figure, being a father now, I now know how crucial it is to have that dichotomy in the house. If you don't have that energy in the house, people will say it's a broken home, and things like that. I think children nowadays, with the advent of technology in America, are probably more okay. They have a better shot anyways, coming from a broken home, I'd think, because you can communicate and talk to anybody today. You can go on Skype and meet somebody from Scotland and develop a rapport, and you now have that best friend. I didn't have a best friend until I was 16 years old, or any friends for that matter. And I know that's probably hard to believe for a lot of people out there, but it's true. So without that father figure, I now know that, I resorted to imaginary friends, and I resorted to escapism. I resorted to, television, and like Will Smith was my dad from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It's weird to say now, but it's true. That's the way it was then. Bill Cosby was my dad. Growing up on, the Bill Cosby Show, that was important to me. TGIF, Boy Meets World, that was my dad. Saved by the Bell, that was my dad. Cartoons were really cool for me at the time. But I was like, I had leftover VHS tapes of Nick at Night. So Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz was my dad. Taxi was my dad. And these shows that, Bob Newhart was my dad. These shows that I inherited that were recorded on Nick at Night, because we didn't have cable growing up, that became my dad. That became the thing that shaped my mind, that raised me. And I'm sharing this. You might wonder, why am I hearing this right now? Because this is the makeup of an artist. Maybe this isn't everybody's origin story. Some people, they don't know that they're an artist until they go to art school, and that's awesome. And I want to talk to those guys, and I want to get behind, their story and everything, but this is mine. And so I was a very sheltered kid. I didn't go out much. I'm a light-complected Hispanic, so I would get picked on all the time for being a gringo. And that doesn't happen anymore. Now Hispanics and Mexicans envy my complexion, and that's a catch-22. But as a kid, I would get bullied all the time. I wonder if kids today still get bullied for something as trivial as that. I hope they don't. Something tells me they might. But from second grade, I remember going to Ochoa Elementary, and there were no doors on, the toilets. The bathroom didn't have doors, so guess what? I didn't want to take a shit there. I didn't want to fucking take a shit there when there was no doors. And I remember some days you didn't have a choice, and people would throw like wet paper towels on you and bully you. And it was terrible. I kind of had a thing for girls at a very young age. I had a crush. I think Vicky Zamora, kindergarten. I had a crush on her. First grade, gosh, who was it? Maybe Vicky was first grade. And I know Monica Gaiona definitely had a crush on her, maybe first. Leti Zamora in second grade, I had a crush on her. I mean, every elementary grade, I had a new crush. I was never that kid that was like, ew, icky, girls are gross, they have cooties. That was not me. I wanted to make out with girls, in first grade. I wanted to lie down on top of girls and, just push my, 2-inch erection on top of them over clothes. Okay, I'm not a creep. I was kind of very self-aware with myself, and also very, very inadequate with myself growing up until, late adolescent years. But that was me, I was this kid, and I think it's very important today, right now, in this moment, to, as Tony Robbins would say, heal the boy and, let the man emerge. And if you're a woman, heal the girl and let the woman emerge. I think that's very important. I always kind of say with my cousin Matthew, who's, I can't wait to have him on the show. He's an incredible person. This guy's, he has my back, and he knows my origin story very well. We always kind of say, just like in Good Will Hunting with Robin Williams and Matt Damon, just it's not your fault. Hug the child, say, I'm sorry, it's okay, it wasn't your fault, and move on, So when I go back and I think about my, the 8-year-old Knives, I have a lot of empathy for him, because I see my son, I see my 10-year-old son in those shoes as well, and I know exactly what it was like to be that age. And so I'm this kid who resorted to television. Television kind of, raised me. My mom was working all the time. I didn't really see her that often. I, don't give her shit for that, because she did what she had to do. And, she's an incredible grandma now. She's not without her flaws, of course. She's a person, but she's also a giant in my eyes. So I'm very grateful for her. But I didn't really see her much growing up. So what really raised me was reruns of The Simpsons, reruns of like Frasier. And I remember coming to the Valley, and like the thing that was super hot at the time was Power Rangers. And they said, yeah, it's on Channel 6 at 7 o'clock. I was like, great. And I think that was Fox at the time. And I remember 7 p.m. Turning it on Fox, and it was Frasier. And I saw like a whole hour block of Frasier, thinking it was Power Rangers at the time. And I remember telling these kids at school, hey, that wasn't Power Rangers, you know? And so, I mean, I didn't know any better, right? So that was just completely dumb, but I really got into Frasier at the time. Television raised me. It shaped my brain. For those of you that have seen Community and that character Abed, that was me, you know, sort of autistic, kind of just, I developed social skills very late in the game. It's probably too late to have an enjoyable time. Middle school was complete torture. So, you know, that had so much to do with it. I thought my life was a movie. You know, I remember seeing The Truman Show at the theater. It must have been like 97, 98 at the time. I'm like 10 years old. And I thought that there was a camera behind every mirror after that. You know, this thing really shaped my brain, and I kind of would talk to myself as if I was talking to some sort of audience, you know. And this is the anxiety of, you know, a creative person. This was the makeup, the code. This is the wiring, they say, that makes up a creative person. This is the way it was for me anyways. So flash forward to middle school. Middle school was a terrible experience. There's this one school on the south side of Donna that I went to. It's called AP Solis. It's still around. You know, I don't throw the word ghetto around often, and that's because I'm from the Valley. You think that would be in my vocabulary nonstop, but it's not. But definitely, had I gone to that middle school, I would have killed myself 100%. I don't say that tongue-in-cheek. I don't say that in a way to kind of make some humor out of it. I would have done it because I went to a kind of privileged middle school, as privileged as you can get in Donna, Texas anyways, in the Valley. And, you know, thank God. It was rough. It was rough stuff. It was hard, you know, terrible. Would get into fights, would lose. I must have lost, you know, the majority of my fights. I don't want to make myself sound cooler than I am. But if I had got in 10 fights in middle school, I definitely lost 6 to 8 of them. And the other 2 were probably, I don't know, I just maybe hit them more this time around. Maybe I started the fight. I don't know. But middle school was rough, you know, being a quote-unquote gringo in middle school, you know, with a 100% Mexican community down here was not the best. I remember a girl putting a maxi pad like on my back, you know, kind of like a kick me sign or whatever, and I'm just walking the hallways like that. That traumatized me. I remember getting a condom that day and I'm actually masturbated in the condom, and I was going to throw it at her face the next day. I haven't really told many people that story, but I was going to do it, but I didn't. I filled up the condom, didn't have the guts to do it, because you know what? I didn't want to fuck her up, you know? I just thought that was, I don't know that was a fair transaction. I didn't go through with it, but I thought it, all right? I was 13 years old in 7th grade or whatever. Middle school was rough, you know. I would get picked on by a 400-pound dude named Jupiter. Well, that wasn't his name, but that was his nickname, you know. And, you know, I remember, I can't say I got a concussion in middle school, but I definitely got knocked out a few times. Concussions came later. But, you know, middle school was super rough. And I hope kids don't have to go through that today in America as much, you know. I mean, the Valley's, you know, one of the poorest places in America, the fattest places, you know, with the most crime, and, you know, our healthcare is all fucked up and everything. You know, all those stats are there and readily available. With all those statistics there and everything, I do have to say, you know, I hope today in 2016, kids have a good shot. You know, a kid like me that grew up on television and grew up, you know, nowadays everything's on the phone. But, you know, I remember for a week my grandma had HBO for a week. It was like a promotion, right? And they would show these behind the scenes kind of making of little mini documentaries of how they made Men in Black, how they made like these movies. That's how I got introduced to Rick Baker and Stan Winston and oh gosh, I always forget his name when I'm doing media, but Dick something. The man who did the makeup for like Frankenstein and The Godfather and things like that. And Dick Smith. I think his name's Dick Smith. I remembered this time. And when I saw these guys doing these special effects for that 1 week, when my grandma, she only had like one television in her house. I must have been like 8 years old. My mind was blown, and I was like, what? People create these aliens? People create Predator? People create the Xenomorph? I was like, holy shit, this is incredible. I was like, that's a job. That was the first experience and impression I had with like, wow, that looks fun. That's something like I could do. You obviously have to be weird to do a job like that. I'm weird, so I thought maybe I'd be able to fit that bill. I didn't know anything about screenwriting. I didn't know what a director did at the time. I kind of thought actors, I always thought it was like all real. Like when I was a kid and you would hear like an album, I thought they recorded it all in one take. I didn't really know like the labor that went behind that. I think like most children kind of look at those things that way nowadays as well. But that was my first introduction to that. So come middle school, once again, I don't really have any friends. Come high school, I still don't really have any friends until I met my friend. I kind of moved to the north side of Donna, and my mom, built a house, the badass that she is, and I got my first friend, which was Serge. And I had some acquaintances here and there on the side that were what I like to call, like the chosen rejects, all these kids that I still hang out with today that didn't really fit in their clique, that were kind of like the outcast of their clique. We all kind of just got together in high school for sure. So shout out to Mark and RJ and Sean and even Orb, and Guillen and a bunch of other dudes that we kind of just didn't really fit in any other clique, and we kind of just got together. So thank God for those guys, and they were just as weird as I was, if not a weirder. Mark kind of knew everything. Pogo, my friend, he was that guy that had all the tapes, that would have cassette tapes, that would have CDs. He was listening to Black Sabbath before anybody. Like, he was that guy. He would listen to jazz and like all these things that I was like, what? Like, all I knew was the radio. All I knew was like, pop music at the time. And then you have Guillen over here who's listening to Cradle of Filth and Cannibal Corpse and Slipknot. And, I was like, whoa, what are these things? So my friends kind of educated me there, thank goodness. And, professional wrestling, WWF, WWE at the time, those things were always in my life. That's another really early memory that I have. The only good memory that I have of me and my father was watching wrestling, him throwing me on the bed, him... and now I do that with my son. So these things are deep rooted, and I've had to like excavate and like dig and unearth these little gems in my mind that, remind me who I really am. And, I saw that in my friends. They were well versed in music and all the things that really matter to you, all the escapisms that matter to you when you're growing up, in middle school and in high school. And so, started wearing the Nirvana shirts, started wearing the Iron Maiden shirts, and I kind of became one of those kids, still very awkward, still overweight, because I was a guy that didn't go out and do sports. I was a guy that just drank soda and ate chips and, begged my mom for Burger King, every Friday or whatever. That was me, and I didn't ask for anything in return. I was like, just leave me alone. I was very socially awkward, inadequate kind of kid. I discovered masturbation at a very early age. I'm talking like 10 years old. And, once you start, once you find your ways of escaping, you kind of don't want to get plugged into the world consciously or unconsciously. If that means, avoiding some parties and not picking up the phone and, saying, hey, I'll meet you here on Friday. We'll go here. We'll go to the mall, and not showing up. That was me. You know what I mean? I didn't have this, the confidence or the self-esteem to go out and be a human being with other people. That was like impossible for me, especially growing up at the time. So being able to be this 28 years old, Knives Monroe, who is doing his own podcast, who's able to articulate and share this story that's quite humbling and, maybe boring for some, to be able to direct actors and to be able to promote film and all these things that I've been able to do that really involves, a lot of social skills, soft skills anyways. I wasn't born this guy. I fucking became this guy, and we'll get to that in a moment. But just letting you know, just want to set the precedent here. that's the way it was for me. I bet a lot of you guys that are listening can probably relate to this. And for some girls that are hearing this, they might be disturbed, but it's okay. I don't have to impress you anymore. So thank God for high school. You know what I mean? By then I was already like a masturbation veteran, I'd already got my gold watch, and I already got, I was already like a pro and kind of knew my body decently well and everything. And this is before like the digital revolution, so porn wasn't readily available. I can only imagine the way that it is for children today. But from 10 years old to 16, I was like a dopamine fiend, And here's what changed for me. It was right after sophomore year, that summer, going into junior year. I was 16 years old. My mom made me get a job. I started working at Whataburger around here. And she rented me. Once I said briefly that my mom worked at a video store. She worked at this place called All Hit Video, which then became a Blockbuster, which then became a taqueria, and now it's just an abandoned building. You know how it is. I would be able to call my mom at 464-7855, and the reason why I remember that is because today it's the Pizza Hut in Donna, and I would be able to call her and be like, hey, can you bring me these movies? Can you bring me these movies? Can you bring me these movies? And she would. I mean, that's how I was able to see, like, at such a young age, like the Breakfast Club, and all those John Hughes movies, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and like kind of grew up on those things. And my mom would bring them home, and there was no you can't watch that movie, it's rated R kind of filter going on in my house. My mom didn't really care. She saw that I was a decent kid that stayed out of enough trouble, that didn't really hurt anybody, that just was entertained by these things. I think she always humored me. So cut to being 16 years old, my mom was at a video store, wasn't working there anymore. She had already became a social worker doing her own thing. And she said, hey, son, I'm going to rent a movie. What do you want? And I was like, whatever. I was like, whatever that says new release, just bring it, whatever it is. She's like, well, there's this thing called Kill Bill. And I said, you know what? That's fine. Just Kill Bill's good. Didn't know what it was. I wasn't a cinephile at the time. I was just a casual, viewer of movies. I wasn't well-versed in anything. I didn't even have a thing that was my own yet. Didn't really have an identity that I could connect with. I was just a poor lost soul swimming in a fishbowl, as they say. And I said, yeah, bring Kill Bill, it's fine. She brings Kill Bill on VHS, pop it in to the VCR, and there's a black title card that says, revenge is a dinner best served cold, an old Klingon proverb. And I said, okay. And then, it was like A Band Apart, and it's like title cards, and it's black, and you hear like this woman kind of like, kind of making those sounds, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? And cut to a black and white shot of Uma Thurman bloodied. There's like, oh, she's like this bride, she got her ass kicked. I'm like, what the fuck's going on? And you hear David Carradine's voice, who you connect with right away, and his name's Bill, because he has a little napkin that says Bill, and he says, do you find me sadistic? And I'm like, what the fuck? And all this shit's happening, and he says, you know what? No, this is me at my most masochistic. Pulls out a gun. Uma Thurman's eyes, I mean, the lighting's just so perfect. It's soft light on her eyes. They're blue, but it's black and white, and so like they look translucent. And she says, Bill, it's your baby. Boom! She takes a .45 Magnum shot to the head. It's like, what? And then it slam cuts to a title card that says the fourth film by Quentin Tarantino. And I get chills every time I explain it. I just got chills again right now. That was the moment for me where I was like, wait, what? And in that moment, it was like a lightning bolt came from the other side of the universe and struck me right in the head. And I rewinded it, whatever, VHS. And I watched it again. Bill, it's your baby. Boom, she takes a cap in the head. And that was just too much for me at the time. There's too many story elements that were just going on. It was mysterious. It set the tone. I'm like, what? This person died? Where am I in time? Is this a flash forward? Is this a flashback? Is this why she wants to kill Bill? I was just it was perfect. It got me. It fucking got me. And in that moment, when I saw that title card that said the fourth film by Quentin Tarantino, that was it. And I knew, holy shit, I'm a filmmaker. I'm a filmmaker. That's what I am. That makes total sense. Like, I get it now. Like, this guy directed that. He wrote this. Like this is his fourth movie. Like he wrote and directed this thing. So those lines, that was him. Like he must have decided where to put the camera. And now all of a sudden I was self-aware, and the language came to me. Where to put the camera, the lighting, and how that mattered, the music, and then there's the title card sequence of Nancy Sinatra, Bang Bang, My Baby Shot Me Down. I'm like, fuck, and now when I watch the movie, I see the Orson Welles influence, and I see the Shaw Brothers stuff, and I know what it means, and I see all the John Woo stuff, and it's just like homage city when it comes to that movie. And that was my film education right there in that moment. I mean, I learned shit. Like, I'm a filmmaker. Fuck. Two things hit me in that moment. Number one was, okay, so I'm a filmmaker. Where do I start? Like on one side, I was like, I had this conviction. On one side, I had this energy. I had like this force that was going to kind of push me through to figure all this out. And so it was kind of like this emotional leverage. It was, what's the word? I felt like I was one with the force in that moment. I now had a purpose, which is an incredible leverage, for any person's spirit. And so that was the first burden, really. The first, with great power comes with great responsibility. I now knew, okay, I'm a filmmaker. I have a long road ahead of me. The second thing that came with that as well was shit. Like, something tells me the next 10 years are really gonna be fucking hard, because you don't just make a movie overnight. Like, how do you get the money for, like, boom, like all the practical stuff kind of hit me as well. So it was all in that one singular, solitary moment. Bill, it's your baby. Title card. In that moment, it all hit me. And I realized, holy shit, this is my destiny, I'm not trying to speak in, these bombastic kind of, hyperbolic terms. That's just the way it was. It simply was. And I saw Kill Bill maybe 4 times that day. No joke. Saw it. It ended with a cliffhanger. Had to see it again. I showed all my friends this movie. I was like, you guys have to see this. And then as soon as it was over, I was like, isn't that fucking crazy? Isn't that fucking crazy? And I don't think I ever told anybody, like, guess what? This movie made me want to be a filmmaker. Like, I don't think I ever articulated it that way. But I then knew that's me, and I want to do this. So then, I started, I did whatever it took to inherit, a video camera, started recording, and I would record like these backyard wrestling matches, because that's the only content that I could really think of at the time. We recorded, me and my friends hitting each other in the heads with steel chairs, and, lighting stuff on fire and jumping off of houses and hurting each other and bleeding and all this crazy stuff that was very cinematic to me. It was action, it was poetry in motion, and I would record these things on cassettes and record these things and transfer them and edit them on 2 VCRs with 2 TVs and all that Robert Rodriguez school shit. And without even knowing, it just came from instinct. And then I remember, I was working and I bought a $500 5 megapixel digital camera that I saw like on QVC or something. And I thought it was cutting edge at the time. It was 5 megapixels. It was like 480p or something. It was garbage. But that was my transition into digital filmmaking. I started editing and cutting on Windows Movie Maker and things like that. And that was me from 05 to basically 06. And I think everybody in high school kind of associated me and my crew with like the wrestling guys that would, shoot and take pictures. And I think even in my yearbook come senior year, it said I was going to make a movie and I was going to be that guy, and so on and so forth. So here we are 10 years later, and I'm still that guy. So that is kind of how I came to be a filmmaker, and kind of, that was my encounter with like the cinema god. Was that was, I guess some people, they have that come to Jesus moment, and, with some people, they feel like they spoke to God or whatever big catharsis revelation that most people have. Mine was with cinema. And, I could go on and talk about, my daddy issues, and talk about how in 2009 I sold my Pokemon card collection for a few $100s, and then I got a plane ticket and went to Oklahoma, and then I kind of met my father face to face for the first time in 16, 17 years. And I told him, what the fuck, man? And, being able to let that go was very important to me. And being able to tell him, I'm a filmmaker, this is what I do, and I have drug-free tattooed on my knuckles, like, fuck you. because my dad, and I'll say this right now, and this isn't me trying to sound cool, because I don't think it's cool, and this isn't me trying to be something that I'm not. My father confessed to me that he was a gangster and he was a drug dealer. I kind of always already knew that. I knew that he did time when he was married to my mom, and I knew that he did probably married my mom just for the connection of her side of the family, for that drug connection, and all my uncles had done time and my grandpa had done time. I wasn't completely oblivious and ignorant to where my genes came from, where my DNA and my family came from. I knew that I knew enough, but to have my father tell me, I asked him if he ever killed a man, and he told me I shot at a few. So I don't know if they died, but I shot at a few. And having him tell me that they dug up corpses from graves and drop them on doorsteps of whoever that body was, like their mother, dropping that corpse off on the porch, on the front doorstep of these houses to send a message, hey, this motherfucker needs to pay, or whatever. Knowing that that's in my bones and that's who I am, and that I look like that person, that, the word dad is not something that I say often. I must have said it maybe 5 times on this podcast, but that's a record. I don't really associate, the word dad was just never in my vocabulary. Now I am a father, so I have to reckon with that. That's where my daughter comes from. And I had to sever that tie to let go of that baggage to become the best filmmaker that I possibly could be. That was part of my growing up as well. I gave college a chance. It didn't really work out for me, and I dropped that ball. I could talk about that. I feel like that's important to the origin story. That daddy issues, that was a lot of baggage right there that I let go, and it helped my spirit. It helped heal the boy, which was very important, and I knew I had to do that on the journey. I could talk about, meeting this girl when I was 16 years old at a Hot Topic, who later became my girlfriend, and we were together for 4 years, and I have her name still tattooed on my body. I could talk about that, and how, when I lost my virginity, she didn't really have my consent, and I told her, I don't want to do this, and I'm on top of her, and she's like, just put the tip in, just rub your dick on it. And I said, I don't really want to do this. And she, with her legs, in full guard, kind of just pushed my cock inside of her. I now know that is rape. I now know that sex without consent is fucking rape. I didn't know that at the time, and that kind of fucked my mind up, you know what I mean? And, shortly thereafter, she developed bulimia, and that was like this third party in our relationship that fucked her up and fucked me up and fucked my mind up forever. So I had this person that was really advanced, and I'm not judging her, because she, still to this day, I don't even want to judge that person who existed 10 years ago. I don't know who she is today, but I don't really want to judge her, because she has her own story and she has her own reasons for why she was the way that she was. And, it's neither good or bad. It just simply is. And, that person is crucial to my story, because the first movie I ever made, I screened in 2012 to 400 people at a sold out theater in the Border Theater in Mission, Texas. And that movie was called Her Doppelganger. And it was about, that relationship that I had with her. And it was about like the horrors of bulimia. So I feel like that's important to talk about, with this origin story. I'm only saying this because it's important to be as self-aware as you possibly can. It's important to forgive yourself and to heal that boy so you can move on to the next step. If you're going to be on this journey as an artist, it's not simple, okay? Your identity is one thing, right? But then you have to take, you have to have a roadmap. You have to have a blueprint. Whatever that blueprint's going to be for you, that's yours. And you have to take action to get there. And sometimes that means getting over your own bullshit to get there. So I had, these roadblocks thrown my way, and I'm trying to figure shit out as a kid, as a 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old who wants to make a movie, who wants to be one of the greatest filmmakers of my generation. I'm like, how do I do that? How does anybody do that? A part of that for me was getting over some of my baggage. So as a kid, dealing with this anxiety, dealing with this depression, dealing with this inadequacy, dealing without, having a father, and I needed that. I was a guy that needed that structure, because as a result of that, I became fucking lazy, and I resorted to television, I resorted to films, and, I've seen over 10,000 fucking movies, and I've read a fuckload of books, and that is great, and I've educated myself, and it wasn't easy, and part of it was because I was inspired, and the other part of it was because I was fucking scared and I was desperate and I needed something. But I did that for myself and I did it by any means necessary. And sometimes that's what you got to do. And I learned that the hard way. So yeah, I forgave my dad, which is really something that you do for yourself. I did that for me. I did that for me so I could go to the next step. And with my girlfriend, I forgave her because you know what? She fucked me up, man. She did. Maybe I'll regret saying this. Maybe I won't, but I'm going to say it. Okay? She was into some rough stuff, and I'm not judging her. That's cool. I was a consenting party in slapping her when she asked me to slap her, and choking her when she asked me to choke her, and biting her and, smothering her with a pillow. We would pretend that we were dead and we would fuck the corpse. I've never told anybody that, but we would do that. And you know what? It was fucking fun. It was fun to be like, let me kill you. You're dead now. Now let me fuck your corpse. That was fun. Okay. It's role playing. Get over it. Grow up. If that's too much for you, get the fuck out of here. Okay. Be an adult. All right. Grow the fuck up. I'm sorry. But what I'm trying to say is, when you try to take that baggage, when you're with somebody for 4 years, you get the tattoo and everything like that, you're connected, you go to prom with this person, you lost your virginity with this person, you do all the big seminal events with this person, you tell them, hey, I want to be a filmmaker, but guess what? They don't believe in you, and you carry that baggage with you to the next relationship, and you project that. That's harmful. That's harmful. So then when you start choking while you're making out with this other girl, and you start choking her, and she tells you, what the fuck are you doing, Knives? I'm not into that. What the fuck do you think I am? Like, why are you treating me like that? That's when I'm like, holy shit, I might have some issues here that I haven't really taken care of, right? Heal the boy and let that man emerge, and he'll come to you. I had to do that. I had to be honest with myself and say, what is going on? I had to heal myself and mend these issues and learn and fuck up. And no, I didn't have that dad teach me these shortcuts along the way, nor did I have an older brother that I could kind of role model after. My role models were the David Lynch's, the Quentin Tarantino's, the Larry Clark's, the Paul Thomas Anderson's, the Lars von Trier's, the Marilyn Mansons. These guys were my heroes. The whole crew from the show Jackass, that I saw every single one of those movies opening day. Professional wrestling, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero. These guys were my heroes growing up, okay? These guys shaped my brains, all right? And every now and then, you get into a relationship with somebody, and part of that relationship, part of that intimacy is letting somebody in, putting your guard down and saying, okay, now I'm letting you in, hurt me. You can hurt me. I'm giving you that trust where you have the ability to hurt me. And that's rough stuff, And, I've been there with those people. I've been there with those girls. And, I made a movie about them. I turned them into art. There's this Blink-182 line, and I can't believe I'm quoting this. I wish that I could find a better thing to quote, but there's that line in that song, I Miss You. Don't waste your time on me. You're already a voice inside my head. Growing up, for me, getting over these girlfriends and stuff, it was don't waste your time on me. You're already a film inside my head. That's the way I mended that. I had to, with my first paycheck, buy screenwriting for dummies because I had to learn that. I did that at 16. I bought screenwriting for dummies and I educated myself because I knew I have a long road ahead of me. Nobody's going to help me. How do I do this? I got to figure this out. I didn't have somebody tell me how to do it. There was no smartphone. There was no Wikipedia. There was no Netflix where you can watch anything on demand. I spend at least an hour of my day scrolling through Netflix, not even fucking watching something. Okay, that's a pain in the ass. I miss the days of going to All Hit Video, looking at Ghost World. This cover looks interesting. I'm going to rent this. I'm going to give this a shot. And then you rent it and then it rocks your fucking world. Now, yes, we live in a world of instant gratification. When we live in a world where, everybody on Facebook says, hey, look at me, reward me for the little that I do. And I get that. It's the dopamine rush, right? I guess it's all cyclical at the end. I guess it all kind of repeats itself, right? So these poor kids, your issues right now, if you're listening to this podcast, I feel you. I've been there. It wasn't easy. This journey wasn't easy. And I still got a long way to go. That's what this podcast is about. This is like another step of like, you know what? I want to find another way to relate. I want to find another way to give value. I want to find another way to learn. I want new things. I want to create this content that's going to live outside of me. This right here is just as equally for the artists in the Rio Grande Valley as much as it is for my kids. One of these days, my son's going to Google, Knives Monroe, and he's going to see all the Outer Heaven stuff, and he's going to see this podcast, and maybe he'll subscribe to it. Hopefully he won't. And I don't know, maybe he will, because him and I have these kinds of conversations. I'm actually going to have the sex talks with my 10-year-old son in a couple weeks, actually. Going to take him fishing. I got to be OG about it, okay? Because I got to, the word rape is out there too much, and he's hearing it. I got to teach this kid, to respect women. I got to teach these kids, about consent. I got to teach this kid, my son, no means no. I got to teach my son, you know what I mean? Hey, man, one of these days, somebody way cooler than me and way more influential than me, and someone that you're going to look up to is going to ask you if you want to smoke weed, and you know what? You're probably going to want to do it, And I'm not going to tell you not to do it. I'm just going to tell you that you need to talk to me and tell me, hey, this kid, Johnny or Tyler or fucking, I don't know, Greg wants me to smoke weed with him. And I told him no, but I don't know, maybe I want to give it a chance. And I want him to be able to tell me that this happened, because I have something to offer him there. So I being a dad is really like, kind of shaping like the child that you were. And that's what I'm doing with my son. He's 10 years old, and I have all this kind of words and wisdoms and actions and practices, and I make him throw out the trash. And I'm really trying to put in that foundation for him. So when he's 18 years old, he's not as fucking crazy as I was. He's not as unstable as I was when I was that age. You know what I mean? I know how fucking rough it is. I got nothing but empathy for that kid. So I know where you guys are coming from. And I'm projecting a lot. And that's kind of what I do. And I'm sorry. # not sorry. But, I was with that girl for 4 years, maybe 3.5 or something. And, the bulimia was definitely like, you've seen those paintings of like girls walking and her shadow's like a monster or whatever. That was that for her. And, I hope she's figured that out. That's all I can really do. I got an education out of that. I learned a lot, It wasn't great all the time, And I took that baggage with the next person and the next person and the next person until I had to snap out of it and say, you know what? Something's wrong here. I'm not really myself. I'm scared. You know what I mean? I'm scared to let somebody in. I'm scared to be honest with them. I was trying to impress these girls, trying to present them with like the greatest version of myself that wasn't really who I was. And I eventually dropped that guard and I said, you know what? If I want to find the best girl that I can, that's going to love me for me, I got to be honest. If I'm going to love this girl fully and like give her my all, I got to be honest with myself and love myself and forgive myself. And so that was a big step for me as well. And I learned that on acid, and that's a story for another time. But, life is crazy. Life, doesn't stay, it doesn't color in the lines for you. Things are crazy and you got to adapt, And I got to tell you guys, if I can leave you with anything when it comes to an artist and our struggles, if you link your creativity to your survival, I think you make pretty good decisions, because my survival was always on the line with these things. My fulfillment was always on the line with these things. My achievement was always on the line with these things. And it's really paved the way for me, and it's worked out for me. And you take your shit seriously. That's what I've done. I take it seriously, because nobody else is gonna. Nobody else has a vested interest in if you're losing weight, if you're working out, if you're eating right, if you're reading books, if you're educating yourself, if you're going to school. You're lucky if you have 2 people in your life that give a shit about what you do for yourself. You're lucky if you have 1 person in your life that gives a shit about what you do to better yourself. Most people don't. Look on your Instagrams, look on your Twitter, on your Facebooks, look through your phone and email contact list and count how many of these people actually give a shit about me. Am I anybody's favorite person? And it's rough stuff. And I'm not trying to be negative because I'm not a negative person. I'm not. But what I'm saying is cash in on yourself. Love yourself. Heal the boy and let the man emerge. I can't stress that enough. And it's definitely worked for me. And if you have heroes, I promise you, they did that. They had to do that to get over their baggage, to move on, because life's too fucking short to dwell in the past, to keep the baggage with you, to hold on to that monkey on your back. It wore me down long enough, and sure, I used it. It amused me. I filtered that through creativity. That was part of it too, and it's brought me here. But it didn't make me a great businessman. It didn't make me a greater lover. It didn't make me a greater father, all that baggage. Letting it go did. Letting it go was a first step, And I had a conviction that carried me above water. And it was the thing that saved my life, film. Film saved my life. I have this friend, and I won't say his name, but I will have him on the show one day. And on his Instagram bio, it has a list of a priority. Number 1 is God. Number 2 is his family. Number 3 is his girlfriend. Number 4 is film, and he's a filmmaker. Some of you might know who he is. I think film is a little low on that list. I would definitely swap out film for God. That's just me. And I'm not going to apologize for that. It's gotten me this far. It's going to take me where I need to go. After 2012, I did her Doppelganger. I moved to Austin, and I was homeless for a while. And I fucking read all of the film section on the library on Guadalupe downtown. I read the whole film section. And that's where, I wasn't really into, oh gosh, what's its name? What's his name? The guy that did Sex, Lies, and Videotape? The guy that did Ocean's 11? The guy that did Shay? Gosh. What's his name? The guy that did Erin Brockovich. I know his name, right? That filmmaker. I never really got into his stuff until I read a book on him, and I was like, wait a second, this guy's pretty badass, right? I educated myself. That's what I did when I was homeless. 6 weeks on 6th Street. I slept on a second-story fire escape after my movie, 48 hours after the greatest high of my life. I remember being in front of 400 people. Some of them were family, some of them were friends, some of them were strangers, some of them were people I had not seen in 10 years. I remember getting the microphone, and some people were in tears, and there was a standing ovation at the movie. And I got the microphone, and I said, you know what? I may never get married. I may never have a college graduation. I may never have a bat mitzvah. I may, I was never the kid that had the football game that caught the winning touchdown pass. Like, I may have never been that kid, but I made a movie. And that's my accomplishment. It's the greatest accomplishment I've made thus far. I was 24 years old. And I am my mother's son. I remember going on the microphone and seeing my mom in the audience, who was proud of me at the time, who, some days she would go to work and see me screenwriting on the laptop, and she'd be like, have you been up all night? And I'd be like, yeah. She's like, get a job, you bum. And then she'd go to work 12 hours, come back, and she'd see me in the kitchen writing on my laptop, screenwriting. She's saying, you've been writing this whole time? Yes. Get a job, you bum. She saw me paying those dues, putting in those hours, and it looked like on the outside like I was slumming it up, bumming it up, being lazy about it, but I was putting in those work, and she was at the film premiere, and being able to get that microphone in front of everybody and say, this is my greatest accomplishment thus far, and I am my mother's son. It wasn't easy. I hope you guys have some sort of sense of that now, and I'm grateful for that. 48 hours after the greatest high of my life, I went to Austin with no money, and maybe like $100, and I was homeless, and I just knew I had to struggle. Somehow I just knew that was the next step, and I did that. And I got an education out of that. Moved back, had to see about a girl. 3 years later, I got 2 kids, and I got a love of my life, and it's made me that's wealth, is what I'm trying to say. It's made me rich. I'm still struggling. I'm still trying to make ends meet. But yeah, I gotta be honest. I don't really care, because I'm wealthier in ways that this is where I do get humble, and I do get kind of, now I'm navel gazing talking about this, but, I look at my daughter and, I've surpassed my father, that's a big middle finger in his face. I forgave that fucker, I'm no longer angry. Anger is an acid that does more harm in the vessel that it, in which it's contained than the harm that it can do on which it is poured, Mark Twain said. And I forgave that fucker. I call him a fucker just because, consider that a term of endearment. I don't know. And, I surpassed that guy, and I look at my children, and I think they're all right. I think they're all right. And I live by these values and these tenets of constantly and never-endingly trying to improve. Part of my story is in 2008, when I was going through the biggest depression of my life, that breakup after 3-4 years, I started listening to Tony Robbins, and that guy transformed my life. Personal Power 2, Get the Edge, Lessons in Mastery. Those things changed my life. Unlimited Power. Get the Edge, Unleash the Power Within. All these things, they saved my life. And when I say heal the boy and let the man emerge, that comes from him. That guy was more of a father to me than anybody else ever was. And I get to pass that on now to you guys. I get to pass that on to my kids. And I do think there's value there. And take that ball and run with it, man, because no one's going to do it for you. That's, one of the common themes I think you're going to find here with this podcast, with the Outer Heaven podcast, and the people that I interview, these artists. You're going to see that in their greatest times, they took massive action and they did something about it, and they got themselves gigs, and they got themselves work, and they were inspired by pain. That's what we do, and it wasn't easy, but I enjoyed a lot of it, and it was fun. And if there was a collage of my life and you saw the greatest hits, I think some people would look at that and say, I would like that. There's 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 spots in my life where people would be like, that looks nice. And you know what? That's a life worth lived. And thank goodness for that. So, without further ado, guys, thank you for listening to me on this journey. I'll sprinkle more of my life and my history as the episodes come on. Now, I'm going to say this right now publicly, that way it's real, and I gotta live up to it. I'd like to make this podcast bi-weekly. Twice a week, should I say, Mondays and Thursdays. So look forward to that. Mondays and Thursdays. You can find me on Instagram, Knives Monroe, or Instagram, The Outer Heaven, Haeven. You can also like that on Facebook, Outer Heaven, Outerhaeven, Outer Heaven. Where, we offer some services, obviously in the photo and film and video department. We have a pillar called Flashback. Some people film wedding and quinceañera videos, but we also want to film everyday events, whether if it's a picnic at the park, or you taking your children to the zoo, or a birthday party, or just you and your friends hanging out, or a military homecoming, or if you have a GoFundMe page, we want to do the video for you. Any sense, any place where we can find value, we want to do that for you. That's Flashback. That's Outer Heaven. You can find me on Twitter at Knives Monroe as well. That's my social. Guys, this has been the first episode of the Outer Heaven podcast with Knives Monroe as your guest. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. Hit subscribe, like this, share this, spread love like violence, and we'll catch you guys next time.